be by land, sea, or air, humans are always looking for new and innovative ways to travel. Here at the DuPage County Historical Museum, an exhibit titled Planes, Trains, and Automobiles ran between November 29, 2023 and June 8, 2024, which looked at the various ways in which transportation has changed over time and what made these changes necessary. From planes in the sky to ships in the water, this exhibit explored how advancing technologies completely changed the way people function in their everyday lives. As this exhibit comes to a close, we would like to walk you through one final tour of planes, trains, and automobiles, beginning with the history of the bicycle. Our two-wheeled history dates back to 1817 in Wheaton, Germany, when inventor Karl von Dros developed the first bicycle. It was known as the Swift Walker because there were no pedals and the wooden vehicle was straddled and pushed forward in a swift walking motion.
French designers improved the bicycle by adding pedals to the front wheel hub. This created a bicycle craze in the late 1860s, as pedaling made it easier for a rider to propel the bike at speed. When most people think about the earliest bicycles, the high-wheeled model comes to mind. This drawing depicts what the high-wheel bicycle would have looked like. The introduction of a larger front wheel and the smaller rear wheel was intended to improve the speed of the bicycle. Each small revolution of the bicyclist's legs would make the giant front wheel go around once, generating a distance of several feet moving forward. The high-wheel bicycles were inherently dangerous, as the cyclists were very high off the ground. With this high center of gravity and narrow, solid rubber tires, which could easily roll off their rim, the slightest bump in the road might cause a spill. By the 1890s, the high-wheeler bicycle was replaced by demands for a safer bicycle, and so the safety bicycle was designed. The vast improvements in safety made by this new design in bicycling was immensely popular in the Golden Age. Here is the largest piece in our exhibit, a woman's bicycle suit, consisting of a hat, jacket, skirt, and bloomers, worn around 1890.
Bicycles are still a popular vehicle for transportation, athletics, and leisure. Here in DuPage County, we have many bicycle shops, including Prairie Path Cycles, Midwest Cycling, and the Bike Hub, just to name a few.
For over 60 years, DuPage County has led in planning, maintaining, and creating bicycle trails. Volunteers in 1963 transformed the old railroad into trails. This created the Illinois Prairie Path. DuPage County now proudly hosts over 500 miles of bikeways and trails. This is a trail sign for the DuPage County section of the Illinois Prairie Path. While the Prairie Path is now meant for cyclists, this route used to carry another form of transportation, the train. This technology was first developed between the late 1700s to early 1800s. Richard Trevithick, a mining engineer from England, invented a high-pressure steam locomotive engine in 1799. He built several trains, but the most successful at proving his technology worked was the Puffing Devil, which successfully carried 6 passengers from Clambourne Hill to the nearby village of Beacon on Christmas Eve in 1801. By 1840, Ireland had an island-wide network of steam carriages, as inventors sought to use the system as a method to keep people employed, because a network of steam-powered vehicles required numerous operators, road staff, and work crews to operate. Railways are still a complicated system to operate, involving many workers and manuals. For example, this booklet by the Chicago and Northwestern Railway Company, which provides instructions to conductors and trainmen, and this operator's manual by the Railway Exchange for various steam-generating units, are both examples of the complicated nature of these machines and the need for many trained operators in the Chicago area. Railways have prevailed as an important mode of transportation for passengers and goods in the Chicago area, as can be seen by these three timetables published in 1972, 1973, and 1968 for the Northwestern and Penn railway systems.
The next component of this exhibit is probably the most familiar to DuPage residents. Every time we cross the road, we see this form of transportation.
The car was first invented by Carl Benz, better known as the father of the automobile. Introduced to the public in 1886, the Benz was the culmination of years of research and was the first practical and commercially sold automobile. Bertha Benz, wife of Carl Benz and a businesswoman in her own right, decided to market the machine's facets by driving the Benz on a 112-mile road trip around Germany. Chicago played a critical role in improving the production of cars. The assembly line techniques, which were first produced in Chicago stockyards in 1807, were applied by the Oldsmobile Company to the auto industry in 1902. This allowed vehicles to be mass-produced, increasing production five-fold. This production company was surpassed by Henry Ford's Model T in 1908, which was much less fragile than the Oldsmobile. When cars were first introduced as a method of transportation, cities and towns were not ready for them in terms of safety and space. They shared the wide roads with horse-drawn carriages, hand-drawn carts, and pedestrians alike. Cars simply did not work in some cities, as there were only so many roads wide enough, since these cities were not designed for motor vehicles in any way. Therefore, cities and towns attempted to invest certain taxes into improving the highways and roads to make motor vehicle travel safer. Some taxes on transportation specifically were therefore set aside for these improvements. An example of this was the Illinois tax on the horsepower of a vehicle. This system was primarily used in Europe, but was also implemented in some U.S. states. Here we have three plates from 1909 through 1918 from the city of Wheaton, which were nailed into the wooden frame of the car and signaled that the appropriate tax had been paid for the level of horsepower of that car. This system meant that more powerful cars were more expensive for the Wheaton resident to own. Flying was a long-held dream of humans. Leonardo da Vinci was the first to analyze exactly how a bird's wings worked and the physics which allowed them to fly. While he never made a functioning glider or plane, his research set the groundwork for future inventors to work on complex and world-changing technology. Semi-functional flight devices started to appear in the late 1800s.
It was not until the 20th century that flying for both commercial and military purposes really began to take off.
In 1911, the first military aircraft was deployed for the purpose of taking photos of enemy positions from the air, so soldiers on the ground could know what they would have to overcome as they advanced on battlefield. These tactics enabled many of the stalemates in World War I to be broken more easily. These planes were primarily made of wood and were therefore extremely fragile, their only weapon being a front-mounted machine gun which used a synchronized gear that fired in rhythm with the propeller.
Flying to deliver passengers, cargo, and mail made great strides after World War I. In 1914, commercial flight services were not something the average person could afford. Planes were still new, expensive, and small. Most pilots made their money off running mail and small packages from airport to airport. This airmail business would be the first commercial niche for airplanes rather than transporting people, as even on the best planes of the early 1900s, the ride was loud and nauseating to passengers.
This game, from the late 1920s, was created in line with the increasing use of aircraft for transporting mail across the United States. The game's instructions tell the player that this most interesting game is based on the landing of airmail in 12 of the major U.S. cities, from Boston to San Francisco. During this period between the World Wars, innovations in aviation technology and infrastructure allowed for metal aircraft with more specialized purposes, such as bombers or cargo planes. During World War II, Planes were critical in the outcome of battles and the war. The vast improvements of planes in the interwar years and the surplus of aircraft after World War II meant that flying was now more comfortable and affordable for passengers. In response to the demands for more commercial flights, Chicago selected Orchard Field in 1944 to become the city's new airport. 5 years later, it was renamed in honor of naval aviator Edward Butch O'Hare. During the 1950s, O'Hare Airport continued to expand to deal with increasing air traffic. By 1955, more people in the United States traveled by plane than by train for the first time in history. Here in DuPage County, we have our very own airport. The DuPage Airport's main runway is the largest in the Chicagoland area and is second in size only to O'Hare Airport's primary airstrip. The airport is located on a former sheep grazing land. In 1927, the land was purchased as a grass strip for air shows. The U.S. Navy took over the area in the 1940s, constructing a small airport to train pilots for the war. After the war, the DuPage Airport came under the county's authority, and as air travel increased in popularity, the airport continued to expand. This is a report of the DuPage Airport Task Force from 1993. In this period, the airport was working on expansion. By 1992, the airport had grown to 2,800 acres, more than double the land it possessed in 1985. Today, the airport is internationally recognized as a premier aviation facility.
The last section of this exhibit focuses on a form of transportation that dates back to between 8,200 to 7,600 BC. The first vessels for water transportation were discovered in the Netherlands.
Called a Pessy canoe, these dugout Pinus sylvestris trees were around 3 feet in length and were man-powered through rowing. Egyptians were among the first to include sails on their ships around 4000 BC. These boats were mainly used to transport materials for temples and other buildings, rather than for regular transportation. Unlike those found in the Netherlands, these Egyptian boats were long and narrow and were mostly made of papyrus reeds with short sails. These smaller boats were meant for shorter trips rather than long voyages. The first recorded long voyage wasn't until 1521, when a Spanish expedition sent navigator Ferdinand Magellan across the Pacific. By the early 1800s, steamships were introduced, although not without many problems. Their size and speed proved to be a consistent challenge throughout the years of developing this technology. The first steamboat to cross the Atlantic was the SS Savannah in 1818. The first clipper ship was made here in America in the mid-1800s. Diesel ships came along in the early 1900s and were a more reliable ship with a strong engine, which led to the construction of container ships that were modernized in the 20th century. Today, ships are often used for entertainment purposes, since cruise liners became popular in the 1990s. This is a pamphlet which highlights the connection between Lake Michigan and the DuPage County area. The Great Lakes have long been a Midwestern trade and transportation center dating back hundreds of years. Lake Michigan in particular was one of the most used waterways when ships were the main source of transporting goods. Chicago's port remained the busiest of them all, bringing in more ships than New York, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Charleston, and Mobile combined. DuPage County proudly hosts over 500 miles of bikeways and trails. Trains connect our county to Chicago, and Chicago has played an important role in advancing the development of the automobile by inventing the assembly line techniques which were later employed by car manufacturers in developing the production of the car. Here in DuPage, we have our very own airport that trained pilots during World War II and has now become a premier aviation facility. Lastly, our connection to the Great Lakes ties our county to the advancement of trade through shipping during the early years of our country's development.
The introduction and development of new methods of travel, of which the Chicagoland area has played a part, has vastly changed individuals' lives. Imagine trying to commute into the city on a high-wheel bicycle, or trying to travel to Europe for vacation on a steamboat. Today we have learned about many methods of transportation from around the world and across time. Out of all the methods of transportation we learned about today, which did you like best?
Thanks for touring planes, trains, and automobiles with us today. If you'd like to see more, check out our website linked below, or come visit our latest exhibits at the DuPage County Historical Museum, located in downtown Wheaton.